Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast, the official podcast of SlashFilm.com. I'm David Chen, and with me are...
Devendra Hardwire.
And Christy Putchko.
Sorry, I fucked that up. Let me do that again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast, the official podcast of SlashFilm.com. I'm David Chen, and with me are...
Devendra Hardwire.
And Christy Putchko.
Devendra, welcome back. You were not here last week. I think you were in Taiwan at Computex, right?
Yeah, it was a fun trip, as always.
Very cool. And did you see any movies while you were there?
I did end up seeing Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, because it was released there last week.
Yeah, it was released internationally before it released in the U.S.
Very confused why. But I ended up seeing it with a bunch of, I think several classes of Taiwanese school kids, and they really like Chris Pratt. Whenever that guy just talks, he says anything. It's not even a funny line. They will just eat it up. So, I don't know. And kids love dinosaurs, so that was a fun crowd to see it in. And I can't wait for our full review because it is an improvement over Jurassic World. So there is that.
Overall, thumbs up or thumbs down, Devendra?
Thumbs halfway. I really like the set pieces. I have to rewatch Lost World actually, because I feel like it's very similar to that movie in that at times it's very well made, but it's also super dumb. So, yeah.
Christy, I think you also saw it as well, right? Did you see Jurassic World?
I also saw it.
Thumbs up or thumbs down from you?
I'm going to go thumbs down.
My
review's on Pajiba. I'm not a fan of this one.
I have
Velociraptor claw down.
I have not seen Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom yet. We'll be reviewing it on the Slash Filmcast when that movie comes out. I did have a chance to watch Jurassic Park this week with my wife, who was watching it for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was trolling me while watching it, because she knows that that's a movie that I really, really love. And there's a scene when Dr. Ian Malcolm says, life finds a way. And she says, hey, that's from the trailer for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Which actually just pointed out how intellectually bankrupt this entire series has become. Yep. But I can't really pronounce judgment upon it until I see it. So I can't wait to check it out. Anyway.
I can, but I'll wait.
All right. Well, anyway. Welcome to the Slash Filmcast. You can find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Today, we're going to be discussing what we've been watching this week and then diving into an in-depth review. This week, we'll be reviewing Hereditary, the new horror film by A24 that's out in theaters right now. It's one of their best opening weekends of all time, Hereditary. I think $13 million opening weekend. Which is a really strong opening for a horror film of this size and scale.
It really shows just what we want to do to ourselves as a culture, too. So,
indeed,
just give us this. Give us an escape from this hellscape.
It did score a D+ cinema score, which is less of a mark of how good the film is, and more of a mark of whether audiences received what they expected. And so I think, I'm looking forward to diving into the film with you guys later on in this episode. But before we get to any of that, we do want to mention one thing, which is that Anthony Bourdain passed away this week, and is quite a shock to a lot of people. But he died at the age of 61, and it's something that like my Twitter feed and Facebook feed filled for days with remembrances of his work. Devendra, I know you were a big fan. How did you react to this news?
Yeah, as I heard this news as I was boarding the airplane to return to New York City, the city of Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
The city of Bowie and everything. I learned about Bowie as I was getting on a plane leaving CES to come back here. I think my first response was fuck, because he's such a unique personality. He is one of my favorite people in general, I think. He is a great television producer and, great host, but also a great writer and a great thoughtful person. There are a lot of food shows out there. His stuff never talked down to other cultures. He was just so curious about everything, really, and trying to understand it. There was so much empathy and so much understanding in what he was trying to do. And he was also just a great writer in general, too. And that all came out in his shows. especially No Reservations and the latest show, Parts Unknown, that's on CNN. But I've read all his stuff. I've watched all his shows, including the first show, which is not very good, but it's really fascinating to see how much he's improved and the people he's worked with have improved. Yeah, this is just tough because as I was saying, we live in a hellscape. It is kind of nice to have a smart guy who isn't afraid to speak truth and cut through the bullshit. He is definitely like the I don't know, like prototypical New Yorker to me. Like everything I love about New Yorkers, cutting through all the noise and nonsense. He was that guy. He had a rough life. He's he talks about like all the mistakes he made and working through addiction and honestly spending a lot of his life in a rough place. But his redemption story I found always fascinating. His shows have been amazing. They're also, if you guys listen to this show and you're not watching his stuff, I don't know what to say because he is such a cinephile and he brought that into all of his shows. I think one of his first Rome episodes was just, all black and white, all, trying to be a classical film or something. There was just so much going on here. I'm still working through this. But yeah, Chrissy, I know you're a fan as well.
Yeah, it was, I was like getting ready to write for the day and someone in Slack said Anthony Bourdain died and I was so shocked I literally screamed. And it's hard to explain because it's like, it was just something about his writing and his persona. Like it was complicated. He was one of our writers of Pajiba privately described him as like a good asshole. And like, I get it. It's like, he didn't like try to come off cuddly. He seemed like the kind of person you would want to sit down with and have like a festive argument with, and like really get into it. And I think I was so shocked because I think I felt like I know him even though we've never met. And like, it was very shocking. And I've watched his shows kind of hit or miss throughout the years, but I never like doggedly sat down and watched a bunch of them. And then over the weekend, I started watching Parts Unknown because someone tweeted that it was on Netflix and it was only going to be there until June 16th.
Yeah.
And it felt like a way to kind of not just pay tribute, but to just also, as a soothing thing, because several people, I mean, I was one of the people that were tweeting and saying like he meant a lot to me and like his passion meant a lot to me and the way he wrote and the way he gave his voice was really inspiring on a lot of levels, like not just as a writer, but also as a person who is like, occasionally just struggling in this world. And like, he's been through it. And like, he's also been really supportive of the Me Too movement and of Asia Argento. And, he was really inspiring to me. And some of my followers wrote to me and said, well, I don't really know Bourdain. Like, it's such a shame I missed out. And I mean, the upside is you didn't miss out. His work is still all here. You can still read Kitchen Confidential. You can still watch his shows. And I mean, they're still amazing. Like, no matter how he went out, like, they're still incredible. And Netflix announced today that they're keeping on Parts Unknown, so you can still watch that show past June 16th on Netflix. And I really recommend it because I know for some people over the weekend I said to somebody I've been watching it, and they're like, I feel like it'd be too hard. And I'm like, no, it's kind of amazing because it's like, it's like listening to Bowie music doesn't make me sad. It makes me feel grateful that we had this person and that they were able to show us the world. And he just has such a passion and compassion for people, but he also doesn't like let anyone get away with anything. Like he takes you to some of these like parts of the world that have bad reputations, and he's trying to show you like what we don't get to see in the news. But then he also is very confrontational with like, he did an episode in Colombia and like they talk about cocaine a lot. Like it's not, he doesn't just give it a soft sell. It's not puff piece stuff. And it's just like you feel his lust for life in everything he did. And it's just really sad. And I don't know. It's been weird because like, every day all the tributes and stuff, one, make me feel good, like you won't be forgotten. But every time I see his name, it does feel like a little bit of a kick to the teeth again.
Yeah, I think especially because things are so rough right now, it was great to have somebody like him around. Like, okay, the world is okay if somebody like Bourdain can be around and call people out
and push back,
and do the thing. So it's especially tough. And like you were saying, like he had such a passion for life that it was incredibly sad to see it cut short. So check out the shows, everybody.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my final comment on this would be last week Jeff and I were talking a little bit about Mr. Rogers. And it's like, I know this seems like a weird comparison,
Mhm.
but in the same way that like the Mr. Rogers doc encourages you to like, okay, Mr. Rogers has passed, but now it's on us to be the Mr. Rogers that we want to see in the world. And I feel like it's the same thing with Bourdain. Like,
Mhm.
it sucks that he's not around anymore, but I think that it's now on us to like to try to push and be that person that we want to see online and in the fight and in our writing. I think, you know, we should continue to be inspired by him.
For sure. And also travel. Travel is like the thing
Absolutely.
I got after, you know, I've always been kind of an anxious traveler, but really diving into his stuff, he really sparked that interest in me and kind of helped me kind of get out of my comfort zone and start going places and not be afraid to travel on my own at times too. I think that's the big takeaway, right? Travel, try to understand your fellow humans, because that's what he always did so well.
There is a piece of the New Yorker that Bourdain wrote in April of 1999 that kicked off his writing career. It's entitled "Don't Eat Before Reading This." You guys are talking about living life to the fullest. For some reason, you know, people have been sharing a lot of Bourdain's writing online this week, and I just randomly want to share this one paragraph that is the one that has stuck with me this week. It's not like his best paragraph or anything, but it's just like the one that sticks with me. He writes here, quote, like most other chefs I know, I'm amused when I hear people object to pork on non-religious grounds. Swine are filthy animals, they say. These people have obviously never visited a poultry farm. Chicken, America's favorite food, goes bad quickly. Handled carelessly, it infects other foods with salmonella, and it bores the hell out of chefs. It occupies its ubiquitous place on menus as an option for customers who can't decide what they want to eat. Most chefs believe that supermarket chickens in this country are slimy and tasteless compared with European varieties. Pork, on the other hand, is cool. Farmers stopped feeding garbage to pigs decades ago, and even if you eat pork rare, you're more likely to win the lotto than to contract trichinosis. Pork tastes different depending on what you do with it, but chicken always tastes like chicken. End quote. Anyway, I was just like, I never thought about that way. But
there's so many more insights for you, Dave.
No, I know.
Like
I know.
how you're,
I know
you're
that's
like,
not
wow,
like
pork. He has a point there.
And that's not the most profound. That's not the most profound point. But the idea behind it is that like that you have choices in life. Like you can choose, you know, the choice that like is extremely safe, or you can choose something that has the potential to be more interesting. And that was something that Anthony Bourdain did really well, which is he was able to choose foods that were more interesting and that were bold and that other people looked down upon. And as an Asian person, as a Chinese person, you know, Chinese people eat foods that Americans find revolting. I mean, that's just a fact. And that's not something that Anthony Bourdain ever. He was never revolted or never turned up his nose at any kind of food, no matter how.
He has eaten some terrible things, but especially if it was something he had to do to be respectful to the host, he do it. It's just, man.
He had this saying about like how food is a story, you know, like when someone shares their food with you, they're sharing like the story of their culture with you, and how like no matter how insane it seems to you, that it behooves you not to turn it down. So anyway,
there's so much. Also, I just want to shout out like I think it was the Hong Kong episode of Parts Unknown that just aired or recently aired, and he got to just like hang out in Hong Kong with Christopher Doyle, Wong Kar-wai's DP. And he just hung out with him, and he like helped shoot the episode. Like that's the sort of cinephile that he is, and like going on those crazy adventures. So yeah, that is, if you want a sense of like just how much of a cinephile Bourdain was, that's the episode to see. But you see that in all the episodes. Like so many food shows, I think of like Bizarre Foods or something, or like the stuff on Travel Network and Food Network. They're so badly made. It's like they try to be food porn, but they're not interesting.
Right.
Bourdain stuff always tried to be more than that. And yeah, inherently cinematic in a way.
You can check out Parts Unknown on Netflix, where they have extended the license for that show for apparently many months to come, according to the Netflix Twitter account.
That's good.
So Parts Unknown by Anthony Bourdain. He will be missed. All right, folks, let's move on to what we've been watching this week. Christy, you've been watching a couple things. Ocean's 8, the new Ocean's film.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I know with the summer movie wager, I have it as my dark horse, and I'm getting a lot of stick about that. It's doing really well, which is exciting, and I'm excited for it. I'm just hoping it doesn't do too well, but for personal reasons, it's fine. No, but Ocean's 8 is a spin-off of the Ocean's 11, 12, 13 franchise. The idea is that Sandra Bullock is Danny Ocean, George Clooney's sister. And she has her own heist, and the cast is amazing. It's Mindy Kaling and Cate Blanchett and Helena Bonham Carter and Awkwafina and Rihanna, and I'm forgetting someone, Anne Hathaway. And it is directed by Gary Ross. The movie itself is fine. It's a completely competent heist movie. But the cast is outstanding. They're so much fun. Mm-hmm. And from just like a fashion perspective, oh my God, this movie, like I could just watch Cate Blanchett stride around in her suits forever. She wears so many super cool, super fun looks in this. And it's just, there's just like a lot of stuff to just visually geek out about that I got a big kick out of. And Anne Hathaway is shockingly funny in this. And that's not that Anne Hathaway is not funny, but she plays against type in this. And I don't want to get too into that because I don't know who's watching trailers and who's not. But I will say this, like Anne Hathaway's performance in this was to me like the great surprise that Michelle Williams' performance is in I Feel Pretty. And Ocean's 8's a better movie than I Feel Pretty, 100%. But it's like you have this dramatic actress that you've sometimes seen do other things or whatever, but she's so funny and effervescent and like unexpected in this. I wrote about it for Pajiba, so if you are more interested in hearing about the Anne Hathaway thing, do check out Pajiba. I've also written up what I think about the sequel should do, which they haven't announced a sequel, but they have to announce a sequel. This movie is just too much fun. It's making enough money that I feel like a sequel's almost guaranteed. But yeah, it's really fun. It's very zippy, and I saw it on Saturday again in theaters because I wanted a break, and it seemed like, as much as I love some of the things that are out right now, Ocean's 8 was like, let's go have like a fun, crowd-pleasing movie moment. And it was great to watch it with like an audience. That was like a really stacked audience. Like it was full and people were having a great time and laughing and cheering, and it was really fun.
Very cool. A couple things I want to point out. First of all, I Feel Pretty. It took me like a second to figure out what movie you're talking about. You're talking about the Amy Schumer movie that came out most recently, right?
Oh yeah. Do you guys not casually reference I Feel Pretty all the time?
I don't. I'm kind of working it in. I'm kind of working it into my vernacular, but it's not quite there yet. But apparently Michelle Williams was in that. I didn't even know that, but she was good.
Yeah, she is literally the only reason to watch I Feel Pretty. For those that did not see I Feel Pretty, you should not see I Feel Pretty. But in I Feel Pretty. I'm just going to keep saying it because I do feel pretty. No, but in I Feel Pretty, Michelle Williams plays this like breathy, like makeup executive. And it feels like she's supposed to be like Gwyneth Paltrow or Ivanka Trump or something like that. But she manages to do this like breathy thing where she does the sexy baby voice from 30 Rock, but like that's not the joke. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. She's wonderful in that movie, and everything else about that movie is problematic and not funny and not very good. But like every time she would like appear in this dress that's like a beautiful blue dress, but it has golden retrievers on it, and then she would like rest her head awkwardly on a lunch table, and you're just like, what is happening? She was just this fairy princess of an executive, and I was obsessed with everything she did in that movie. So it's like Anne Hathaway has a moment like that where it's not the same character remotely, but where she gets to do something so different from anything we've seen her from that it feels like there's no map, and it's just really fun to watch her play in that area.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You've just done more to intrigue me about I Feel Pretty than any of the marketing campaign for that film. But I will have to check that out, especially when that clip hits. Especially when that clip hits YouTube in 6 months. But also, someone pointed this out on Twitter the other day, and it completely blew my mind that the reason, like they postulated that the reason it's named Ocean's 8 is so they could make 3 of them without overlapping with the existing Ocean's films.
Oh yeah.
Didn't even occur to me that was the reason, but now it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
There's been a lot written about Ocean's 8. Christy, I'm curious if you've read any of the writing about it. Like, for instance, I think like David Ehrlich wrote this piece for IndieWire about how studios that choose people like Gary Ross to make movies are taking the quote-unquote safe path. I think Amanda Hess wrote something about how Ocean's 8 is like we have to stop with the female-led reboots of male-led films because basically it's better to tell original stories rather than trying to like do the same thing but also do it with feminist ideas and try to redeem the original in some way. What is your opinion on kind of the discourse around this movie?
Well, I mean, I think the frustration coming from critics about Ocean's 8 is justifiable. It's that Gary Ross did not make his own movie. He made his version of a Soderbergh movie. And like Gary Ross is not a guy known for his style. He's what's the word? A workman? Is that what I'm thinking?
Journeyman?
I think Seabiscuit would say otherwise.
I mean, to be fair, I haven't seen Seabiscuit since it came out.
No,
So maybe
I don't know anything about Seabiscuit.
He's not a guy with a strong visual stamp, is what I'm saying. And
yeah.
like I feel like, you know, it's a little frustrating that with Ocean's 8 they gave it to him, and when they announced that I was like, the cast is great, but Gary Ross does not make me excited. And it's the same thing to me as the Solo argument with Ron Howard. It's not that Ron Howard's not a good director, it's just that, like, you know, Ron Howard doesn't give me like an immediate taste in my mouth of what that meal's going to be. You know what I mean?
To paraphrase Arrested Development, him?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't read Amanda Hess's piece. I bookmarked it because I do want to read it, but I didn't get around to it today. But I think that there's something to be said for that, because, like, you know, people are comparing this and the Ghostbusters movie, and I get it, because you're basically saying, like, well, what if we plug in girls? And it's like, well, why don't we create something new? But we know why. It's because Hollywood is still afraid to trust women in lead roles. So they're like, well, if we can sell somebody on a concept they already like. But it sets up this weird conflict then, right? Because then you have the people that are like, but I like the original, and why you gotta put girls in it? And it's like, you know, those people were never going to see the movie anyway, but now they're fired up about a movie they're not going to see and they were never going to see. So I don't know how helpful that is. And like, yeah, I actually feel like the things that pin it to the Ocean's franchise are kind of the weakest elements of Ocean's 8. Like, you know, they have to keep mentioning that she's one of the Oceans, and I'm like, who cares? Like, no spoilers, but I mean, her being related to Danny has nothing to do with this plot.
Yeah, she was clearly a close sibling to never be mentioned.
Never have come up in any of the first three Oceans films.
Yeah, it's hilarious. For me, the biggest issue here is not just that Gary Ross is kind of a boring director, but this movie screams to have been directed by a woman. You know, and I think that's like a fundamental. It's practically like a cinematic crime that a woman didn't get a chance to make this movie.
Right, because you're making a movie about women in like a man's world, and you're making a movie that's supposed to be by women and for women, and or like for women and about women, and then just, you know, put a woman in the director's chair. Like, a woman co-wrote the movie, and like there are all these amazing women in it. Like, it's not that I think only women can tell women's stories, but I do think that there would have been like,
or it's more like, like if you're gonna choose a man, you know, Gary Ross, really, you know, I mean,
right. And like, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I'm not necessarily like they had to pick a woman, but like I feel like Gary Ross is, you know, Gary Ross is safe in a lot of ways, and not just his directing style. So yeah, that's part of in my piece for Pajiba about what I want to see if they do an Ocean's 9. Yeah, I want to see a female director in that spot. There are so many exciting female directors that are working right now. Give one of them a shot. Let her play with this world and these characters, and, you know, because it's like there's good fashion stuff in it, but some of it feels kind of like a checklist. Like, there's like one shot of shoes where it's like, women like shoes, right? Okay, let's move on.
I think I had a fever dream at one point where Sofia Coppola made this movie, and just imagining what that would be like, something like that, right? Like somebody with actual visual sense and who has been making movies, you know, trying to say something about women for a long time.
Yeah, and this movie is like so much about fashion and so much about luxury, and like they do like have moments where they're like, look at the jewelry, look at the whatever. But it's not until like the actual Met Gala that I feel like the movie understands how much fun it is for women to watch these fashion moments. So yeah, there's like missed opportunities like that I would really like to have seen further explored.
In Amanda Hess's piece, she writes here for the New York Times, the men of Ocean's 11 got to do one thing the women of Ocean's 8 do not: star in a good movie. Upon second viewing, the 80s Ghostbusters and Overboard aren't lofty critical achievements either, but at least they're originals, which gave them the room to become phenomena. Note to Hollywood, when women complain that they aren't afforded the same roles in Hollywood that men are, they weren't speaking literally, end quote. So, yeah, it's a good piece and very interesting. But despite all those terrible things I just mentioned about the movie, Christy, I'm glad you had a chance to enjoy it. I'm glad
it's fun.
Yeah,
it could be better.
Yeah,
it's
you
fun.
know, that it was breezy fun, and I've been told it's a perfect date movie. So I think we'll check it out at some point. You know, I do want to do so that's Ocean's 8. It's out in theaters right now. I do want to do a brief check-in on the Summer Movie Wager, because you mentioned Oh, hey, like Ocean's 8, you didn't put on your summer movie wager
It's
list.
my dark horse.
It's your dark
my dark
horse, but it does in fact look like at its current trajectory, it's going to come in around 9 or 10, right?
Yeah.
For the summer,
It could, yeah.
which puts it right around where I put Ocean's 8 on my list. How are you guys feeling about your list at this point? I mean, do you guys feel like, oh man, really some terrible decisions I made during the course
It's
of
not that I think I made terrible decisions. I wish that I had more faith in Ocean's 8 and less in Solo, but I'm still feeling confident.
All right. Devindra, any thoughts?
But we didn't know. We had no idea. For the record, when we did that summer movie wager, we knew nothing about Solo, except that it was about that it's about Han Solo, and like those numbers have been depressing.
The Solo numbers, it is basically become apparent that Solo: A Star Wars Story will be the lowest grossing live action Star Wars film of all time, and that includes the original trilogy not adjusted for inflation. Like,
ouch.
Like we're talking about like Empire, Return of the Jedi, like those movies not adjusted for inflation. So it's pretty rough going for Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Pretty rough. Yeah.
I think like my big regret is first of all, I put Deadpool 2 way too high. I think I had it at like number 3. And it's not going to be number 3. And I put Incredibles 2 at number 4, and I think that was a big mistake. Because I think Incredibles 2 is going to do really, really well. I think Incredibles 2 is going to be like, based on the buzz and the pre-sales, it feels like it has a chance to be this year's Finding Dory. So
wow.
that's like kind of where I'm like regretting my choices. But I still feel like I'm going to beat everyone. How about you, Devindra?
I mean, honestly, I haven't been paying much attention, but I also have Incredibles 2 at number 4, and I should have just had more faith in my gut instinct for what Ron Howard would do with that movie, and put Solo much lower than 3. But whatever.
I think the biggest failures of Solo are not as a result of Ron Howard.
I
I would say they're the script.
I would say it's very much at the script level.
Certainly in the script, but also that's a longer conversation.
Yeah.
Ocean's 8, I have at number 8. We'll see how that works out.
Yeah, so it might work out. People have there's already been sites that are now predicting. There's like pro box office sites that now predict what every movie will make for the end of summer. And according to those predictions, Devindra, you and I are neck and neck for the winner. So we'll see what happens.
What did they say the Meg is going to do?
I don't think they predicted Meg would do very well.
I want the Meg to come in.
Have you guys seen the Meg standees? I'm so excited, but I've only been around the Meg standees by myself, and it won't work as a self date.
I have seen them. They're amazing, and also that trailer is
so
amazing. I cannot wait for that movie. That movie will.
I can't either. I don't think it's going to make as much as you do, but I legit really want to see it.
It's going to be so fun. Yeah.
Angie Han and I have been talking about that movie since they announced like the optioning of it.
Pro.boxoffice.com has projections that do not have Meg anywhere in the top 10. But it does, however, have Skyscraper at number 10. So just going to put
Where does Teen Titans go?
It is also not in the top 10 list. It's weird, Christy.
Well, then fake news. I mean, it's out.
That trailer is very nice, though. That was a fun trailer to see right before Deadpool.
Yeah. Also, like, there's this whole narrative online now, guys. Have you seen this? That like Christopher Robin might do really well. I don't know about that.
No, this is not a narrative. This is like a weird conspiracy theory that I put no stock in. Look, Pooh is cute. We all know Pooh is cute. That did not save the last year's Christopher Robin movie either.
Well,
yeah,
I think
and also Paddington was cuter, and
yes, and we had that this year, and it's out on DVD. Yeah. You should all go buy Paddington 2, and I'm astonished we haven't talked about that on this show.
I will mention it because I actually watched this week. But yeah, Christopher Robin released a trailer recently that was much better than the extremely depressing teaser trailer. So maybe Christopher Robin's going to be good, guys.
I think you'll have a strong opening weekend, but if it is anywhere near as depressing as I suspect it will be, it's not going to stay up there.
I'm sure parents will want to bring their kids to cry, basically.
It is just so bizarre that we had a movie called Goodbye Christopher Robin not very long ago in 2017.
Like last
year. And now there's another movie called Christopher Robin. I mean, even with like Armageddon and Deep Impact or Dante's Peak and Volcano, like the names are really, really different. You know what I'm saying? But the idea that we're having 2 movies that have the name Christopher Robin in the title in 2 years is insane to me.
Right. Also, it's like Christopher Robin's story's not a happy one. Like Goodbye Christopher Robin made that very clear. And like, that was part of the reason I was like, I don't enjoy this movie at all. Like It is not like I warned people. It's like, look, if you love Winnie the Pooh, maybe don't see this movie. It's his childhood was not awesome after his dad decided to make him famous.
Indeed. All right. Well, Christy, you've been watching one other thing, right?
Yeah, I'll talk about this briefly because we've been kind of luxuriating. But
Yes.
yeah, I also saw Hotel Artemis, which is out in theaters now. It's the written and directed by Drew Pearce, who wrote and directed the Marvel one-shot Hail to the King. And Hotel Artemis kind of plays like a John Wick spinoff. It's completely unofficial. This is not at all related to John Wick, but if you know,
They just stole that idea.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not subtle.
How is this a thing? How did they just steal like the hotel idea from John Wick?
Yeah, it's
I'm very
basically like
confused.
the Continental, except that Hotel Artemis is not actually a hotel. It is a hospital, but specifically a hospital for high-rolling gangsters who pay a membership fee so that whenever they need to be stitched up, they have a place to go. So Jodie Foster plays the nurse, and she's really fun in this. She's like very like harried and like she's basically like a sheriff, like, you know, like strutting around and telling people what to do. And there's all these rules about how you have to behave in the hotel. You know, you can't
All
kill
these
the
rules,
guests.
you say. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much like I said. It's basically a John Wick spinoff and totally unofficial. It's like one of those novels you find at the grocery store that's like Star Battles.
Yeah.
Starring Luke.
Except this is a good
Hardwalker.
cast too.
No, I think it's a really
It's
fun
insane.
movie. The critics seem split on it. Some people think it doesn't live up to its promise, but like my thing is I think it promised you a really fun, weird movie, and it doesn't have as much action as a John Wick movie. But it has like it has like a lot of kind of like moody scenes, and my thing is really that the character work by the actors is so much fun because the cast is Jodie Foster, Sterling K. Brown, Sophia Botella from Kingsman, Jeff Goldblum, Jenny Slate, Zachary Quinto, Charlie Day, Dave Bautista, and like some of them are playing so wildly against type. Like Charlie Day in this is like this real sketchy arms dealer, and that's
Jeff
not a spoiler.
Goldblum.
It's on the posters. Jeff Goldblum is fantastic in this. It's so I don't want to say anything else,
Yeah.
but it's just so much fun to watch. Like it's just like a really good, weird, like dank, gritty movie that like, you know, it's really great for like a Friday night or, you know, eventually when it's on digital, if you want to just have a beer and kick back to it. I think it'd be a really fun movie. So yeah, Hotel Artemis, it's not on a lot of people's radar, but if you like John Wick, I think you will like this. It's not officially on that vein, but it's very fun.
It's very much my jam, but also I like John Wick and I'm pissed off by this movie and the fact that they can literally just steal one of the core ideas from John Wick. I cannot wait for Hotel Artemis v. John Wick, the lawsuit. That is going to be the movie I'm looking forward to.
Well, I don't think John Wick is going to extract much money from Hotel Artemis.
Yeah.
Because the movie bombed horribly at the box office this weekend. But
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money it made. It matters how much money the studios have, right?
yeah, I guess that's true. But yeah, Hotel Artemis came in 8th at the box office this weekend. And made $3 million in over 2,000 theaters. So, pretty rough. But that's sad to hear. But sounds like Christy Puchko is a fan, and you'd recommend this movie. Yeah.
Since we're going to talk about a really harrowing movie today, I was like, I'm going to talk about some fun action movies that you guys will enjoy. So yeah, Ocean's 8 and Hotel Artemis. They're good times. See them in theaters.
Devendra Hardawar, what have you been watching?
On the plane to Taiwan, I finally got to check out Thoroughbreds, which is it's an interesting film. It's written or directed by Corey Finley. It's about two upper crusty girls in Connecticut who really live in that bubble. And having grown up in Connecticut, I can only imagine what that life was like for so many people. I used to play soccer. And I'd visit other high schools and be like, man, this school's just so much better than where I was. So that's my, experience of rich Connecticut. But yeah, this movie's about two girls. One who went through, I don't know how to describe it, like a traumatic event involving a horse. And it was a very violent event. And she is kind of reconnecting with one of her old friends. I think in a way just to help her re-socialize. I think the concept here is that the initial girl with the horse incident is having some severe psychological issues, and her friend, they end up connecting on a deeper level, but also turns out her friend, who seems to have the perfect life, may also relate to her in other ways too. This movie is really about them connecting, and at one point there is a plan to murder the normal girl. I don't know, the second girl's father-in-law. It's all very complex. But actually, I had a lot of fun watching this movie. There's a lot of like dry, dark humor here. It's a lot like Heathers, I'd say. Except like not as maybe not as flamboyant as that movie. It's very dry. It's kind of subtle in terms of what it's doing. But yeah, my main reaction to it is like, oh man, this is what rich people in Connecticut are really up to. It's a lot of like horse murder and plotting to kill each other, I guess. But yeah, worth a watch.
All right, that's Thoroughbreds, and yeah, the trailers look really provocative, and it's gotten good reviews. So
yeah.
I'm hoping
Also, two great actresses, by the way, Olivia Cooke, who's great here, and Anya Taylor-Joy, who's been in a bunch of horror movies recently. Great performances from them. And also, I believe this is the final movie to be released with an Anton Yelchin performance too, and he's great in this. Yeah.
Well, that's Thoroughbreds, and it's available on video on demand or on Planes, which is where Devindra saw
on
it.
Planes. It's a good plane movie, because it's a good-looking movie, but also you don't need a giant screen for this one.
I want to mention a couple things that I watched this week. Had a chance, as I mentioned, to see Paddington 2. Which is something that my wife really wanted me to watch, and also I've heard from a bunch of critics that it's very, very delightful.
It's so good.
It's delightful. It's delightful. It's really good. It's like a perfect family film. And if you want to be delighted, if you want to be moved, if you want something that's really visually inventive and very stylized.
Hugh Grant giving his all.
Hugh Grant giving a great performance.
BAFTA-nominated performance,
yeah.
you.
Yeah. Then you should check out Paddington 2. It sounds like you both enjoyed it as well, yes?
I love that movie. I like literally. I know it's really early to do top 10s, but it's in my top 5 right now. I think Paddington 2 is a absolutely splendid movie, and beyond just being a really cute, really fun movie that's great to watch when you're having a bad day because it'll just lift your mood like a million balloons. It's also like really inspiring because like Paddington's whole deal is that like no matter how bad the situation, he's trying to make it better and he's trying to like find the light. And I watched this in January and it was really wonderful, and I'm just I'm super glad that it's out there. Like, it's on DVD. I bought it. I love it. I'm excited to share it with my nieces because they love Paddington. They love his coat. They love his little bare face, and I think they'll get a real kick out of watching him clean windows with his behind.
There you go. It's a really fun, there are some set pieces in that movie too that are so much fun.
Agreed.
There's also like nods to classic silent comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a nod to like some Charlie Chaplin stuff. It's really clever.
Yeah.
It's like very smoothly done.
The director is very talented. Paul King, he did like Mighty Boosh, a bunch of episodes of Mighty Boosh, and so definitely like a really distinct visual style to the film. But yeah, I agree with everything you guys have said. It's a thing that if you're feeling down, it's something you watch to cheer yourself up. It's extremely British, so that's a bonus for some people. And unfortunately, it didn't do super well at the box office in the United States. It made about $40 million. Did an extra $180 million, in foreign sales. But I think this is a movie that basically deserved better than it got in terms of the number of people that saw it. So I would say
it got caught up in all the Weinstein stuff though, because it was a Weinstein movie, and they had to sell it off before it was released over here, or they did sell it off. So you don't have to feel bad about watching it.
It deserves a second look, and it's out on video on demand, Blu-ray, DVD right now. So check it out, Paddington 2. I had a chance to watch a couple movies about sneakers and sneaky people. Had a chance to watch Sneaky Pete Season 1, finally finished that after a really long time, and it is really, really fun. I'd highly recommend you check it out if you like confidence men films and people hatching up crazy elaborate schemes that may or may not work. Sneaky Pete Season 1 is available on Prime Video right now. But also I had a chance to watch Sneakers for the very first time, and I'd never seen this movie, and it's extremely embarrassing that I'd never seen it because I host a podcast with Stephen Tobolowsky, and Stephen Tobolowsky plays a significant role in Sneakers. But yeah, Sneakers has been around for quite a while, and is a very beloved film. It came out in 1992. It's been like 26 years since the film came out. And of course, the movie is like heavily tech based. There's a lot of tech in the film, and so the big question is: does the film hold up even though all the tech is old? And the answer is yes, because I think like really the main elements of this film are kind of the way it connects these dots from like A to B to C, like all the sequence of events that these people like hatch this crazy plan. It feels like many aspects of Sneakers heavily inspired Mission Impossible 1 to me, you know, just in terms of like how those scenes are structured, like the breaking in
very
scenes.
Slowly through these motion
Right.
detectors.
Yeah, like oh, here are the 15 obstacles we need to overcome in order to break into this place, you know. So including some like devices that they use that are visually similar to the ones they use in Mission Impossible. But really it's the camaraderie between the characters that I think helps to sell the film, and this is an amazing cast. You know, you got Robert Redford, Dan Aykroyd, and Sidney Poitier, right? And so some great performances. River Phoenix, David Strathairn, actually. River Phoenix and David Strathairn putting in some great performances. Mary McDonnell, everyone is great in this movie. But Stephen Tobolowsky specifically I want to call out because that is an amazing performance. He goes from being a buffoonish cartoon relief character to being like a menacing kind of like almost evil force in the film within the span of maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And that's awesome. Like that's just, it's great when a movie can kind of reverse things like that for you all of a sudden. And I think Sneakers does a great job of that. So I think overall it's still a very, very enjoyable film that holds up. And the things that are great about it aren't, you know, things that can be easily dated. I think, you know, the movie is one of the few films that accurately predicted that the information age would be where our new fronts of warfare are fought. And so for that reason, I think a lot of people revere it as being very prescient. But I think this is still a great film and well worth watching if you haven't seen it yet. Devindra, you watched this recently as well, right?
I did just rewatch this. We didn't plan this, but this is a movie I used to watch a lot during the 90s. I just haven't seen it in a while. And I was fascinated to see how much it holds up. It is a great heist movie. It's also a great like movie about the process of hacking and sneaking into things too. Like just all those little bits. It really made me wonder why we just never really saw more from Phil Alden Robinson, who directed, you know, this and Field of Dreams. You know, he had a couple hits for a while, and I've been reading, and he was just really choosy about his project. So, you know, he had some other movies like Sum of All Fears. Remember that?
Yeah, the Ben Affleck Tom Clancy movie, right?
Yeah. And also he was he's directed Some of the Good Wife, and I think he's a co-creator of that. Or
he's a writer on The Good Fight.
The Good Fight. Yeah. He helped co-create that one. But also he directed Some Good Wife, I believe. He's been around. He's been doing some stuff. I just wish like we got more movies from him, because this Sneakers feels like a masterpiece. It feels like I want to see more in this universe. I can imagine like a reboot, you know, with some of these folks today. And let's continue this storyline, because this was a beloved little thing.
Devindra, you're like glitching out a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more for a second?
Testing 1 2 3. Hey.
Yeah, it's coming back a little bit. Come back.
Okay.
Do you mind repeating just the last couple sentences, if that's possible?
Sure.
It feels like his masterpiece, is what you said.
Yeah. I feel like Sneakers is a masterpiece, and it's a movie that deserved some sequels or some sort of follow-ups. We could reboot this movie today, you know, with much of the same cast and really update it to, you know, modern tech, and I think it would be just as good. So I hope, I hope somebody gets a chance to do that, because all these damn reboots, this is the one we really need.
Yeah, I kept thinking to myself as I was watching, like, what would a reboot add to this? And I think there is potential to like update it with today's tech, and
or a TV show. Like this would be a great like streaming TV show or something.
Indeed. But anyway, Sneakers, great film, worth checking out. I saw it on video on demand, and you should too if you haven't seen it yet. Excuse me. Let me take that again. And you should too if you haven't seen it yet. All right, before we move on to our review of Hereditary, we got to thank all the people that donated to this show. Thanks to Darren Ma. Thanks to Jason Ross from Brooklyn with their extremely generous donations. Thanks to Andy B. from whythehatepodcast.com. Thanks for your donations. Thanks also to Luke Delacosta, Thomas Jensen, Matt Rockman, Eric Lalana, and Carrie Preston for contributing at the rate of $2 per month. You can always donate to the Filmcast, help us defray the cost of doing the show by going to /film.com, clicking on the /filmcast tab, and using the PayPal links on the side of the page. Or you can just go to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/filmcast. All the money you throw our way does go to help us defray the cost of seeing movies and putting on the show. So we really appreciate it. All the people who donated this week, thank you so much. Let's get to our review of Hereditary. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Give me 1 second. That was from the trailer for Hereditary, the directorial debut of Ari Aster. Ari Aster? How do you pronounce? Does anyone know how to pronounce it? Ari Aster?
Good question.
Let me do that again.
Okay.
That was from the trailer for Hereditary, the new film by director Ari Aster. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. When the matriarch of the Graham family passes away, her daughter's family begins to unravel cryptic and increasingly terrifying secrets about their ancestry. Devindra, I'm going to go to you first today. You tweeted about Hereditary, and you said the following. Clenched my teeth so hard during Hereditary, there was blood in my mouth after. So yeah. Good horror. Tell us more about that. Did you is that a true story? Did you exaggerate?
It is a true story because I have when I go to sleep, I wear a mouth guard to keep my teeth from like grinding.
Yeah, as do I.
Yep. Yeah. It's a good thing because your gums erode if you don't do that for some people. But anyway, I have some issues if I clench my teeth too hard, and that certainly happened in this movie. So it is really strange to like leave the theater being shook, as the kids would say, from this movie. I would say this movie is more like violently shaken. Like this movie will leave an impact on you. And went to the bathroom and I was like, oh, something in my mouth, and just like see blood in the sink. Like, oh man, okay.
So what was it that created this reaction? Like, was it the tension? Was it the jump scares? Like, what was it for you?
I feel like this isn't really a movie made with jump scares. Like it is really the tension. It is the sense of dread. It reminded me a lot of my favorite horror movies, like The Shining, a movie from like the first frame. You could just kind of feel the pure, unbridled dread in it. And to me, that is far scarier than so many, than jump scares and things like that. And there are points, this movie does have sequences that will kind of, scare you as well. But I think it does them in new and different ways. There's a lot of like low light scares, I'd call it, like things where you could barely see something happening, like just out of the corner of your eye. And to me, that kind of evokes like just being up late at night and, your night vision is on and you see something in the corner and it could be something, something you haven't noticed really before. It is that sort of like, I don't know, instinctual fear in a way of just what we're afraid of. And this movie just really taps into that really well. And at the same time, it is a fascinating family drama and exploration of grief. There are sequences in this movie where people are just talking, right? And the words they say to each other feel absolutely violent. And that the concoction of all those things, to me, makes this a tremendous horror movie. We could certainly talk about the ending, because I think there are more complicated feelings around that. But yeah, this movie, man, I cannot remember the last time a horror movie has really gotten under my skin like this.
All right, Christy, I think you saw this movie at South by Southwest, right? Is that right?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
Have you had a chance to see it again, or are you going off the memory?
I did not have a chance to see it again. Well, that's
Would
why
you see it again?
I had the chance. I wimped out.
No,
I'm not ready.
I don't begrudge anyone seeing this movie only once.
I will see it again. I think especially end of year, I try to watch the stuff that I really liked again to kind of figure out what my personal top 10 is. But yeah, I was thinking about seeing it again in theaters this weekend. And I chose not to.
You should take Zach to see it because that would be fun. But yeah,
I think my husband has to see it. But my concern was twofold. One was that after the Born Dane thing, I was already feeling very sensitive.
Oh yeah.
So I was just kind of like, I just want to go see Ocean's 11 and just laugh for a little bit. But two, and we can get into this more in spoilers, but two was that I've heard that audience reactions to this have been very different, and I didn't want to spoil what for me was an amazing experience, because at South by Southwest, I saw this at the midnight screening. It was the same night I saw Ready Player One, and I looked up my tweets because I remembered that I was tweeting, but it was 2 months ago and I was very tired.
So you saw two horror movies that night. I see.
Yes. One that I loved and one that was terrible. But I tweeted, it's 3 a.m. and I'm never sleeping again. #Hereditary. I was up until 5 a.m. that night. I could not sleep. I was staying with a friend. I got back to their home and I turned all the lights on in the room I was staying in for reasons. And even with all the lights on, I could not sleep. I was just too freaked out. And at 5 a.m., I basically collapsed. And it was mostly because I was interviewing Ari Aster and Nate Wolff and Millie Shapiro the next day. So I had to be somewhat sharp. And I rolled in looking like death warmed over. And I said to them, like, this is your fault. Like, you've done this. But the interview actually went well. I'm really relieved. But I was terrified because I was like, I think I slept an hour and a half that night. I was so freaked out. And for weeks after, if there are two images in this movie that if I think of, I really do have a hard time going to sleep. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I love this movie. I think that it is, I said in my review, I think Aster is a new master in terror. I think that this is a very unique horror film that plays against what people expect. And I think that's probably why it's getting very strong reactions.
What did you like most about it, Christy? Like, what aspect of it resonated most with you?
I don't remember the last time I was this thoroughly terrified through an entire movie. I really love the Babadook. For me, that's like a touchstone of recent modern horror that really freaked me out. I remember vividly watching the Blair Witch Project in theaters opening weekend and how scary that was. But both of those things like kind of took time to like brew their tension. This brews its tension so quickly that like I was, and this is kind of gross and I'm sorry, I was dry heaving throughout Hereditary.
And there's certainly shots that would make you just
but
want
like not even because I was 100%, but not because I was grossed out, but because I was so anxious that like my body was, I was having a panic attack. I basically had a panic attack for most of the movie.
Oh wow.
And so lots of reasons why I don't necessarily say I would go see it again right away. But no, I think that the dramatic tension in it is incredible. And then it's like when they start actually adding in the horror elements, I couldn't deal. Like I was really freaking out. Like, I watching movies. Yeah, we know we're watching something that's fiction, but there is something about the way Aster put this together. It's like watching 2001 or something. Like your brain can't deal. Like your brain starts freaking out. And I think it's masterful. I obviously think it's not for everybody. And I actually warned my brother-in-law about this movie because he was like he's like, yeah, I hear there's some scary movies coming out, and they had liked A Quiet Place, and he's like, is it like A Quiet Place? I was like, no, it is not. But he saw it over the weekend. I was really excited. He like texted me to tell me he had really screwed up dreams all night.
Mission accomplished movie.
Yeah. I was like, that's fair. But I mean, I warned him. I said, like, it's not just this isn't just a scary movie. This is a traumatizing movie. And I think it's really brave, and I think it's pretty sensational.
Yeah, I saw it in a semi-packed public screening at the Brooklyn Academy of Music here, and generally a good audience. So I wasn't too worried about how it'd be. I think people were really into the movie, right? They were screaming, they were saying, "What the fuck?" like several times.
Yeah.
There was this one guy in my screening who sat in the absolute worst seat, like in the back row, and like in the corner, like one of the edge seats. And I was just like, what? Yeah. At first I was like, going to the screening and stuff, I was like, oh, that's strange. That's a weird reason to be sitting there. And by the end of the movie, I was just like, what the fuck is that guy up to? What's he doing there? What? So yeah, that's what this movie did to me.
Yeah,
well, much like some of the characters in the film, I have a horrible secret, guys, which is that I thought this movie was fine. I didn't think it was amazing. And I have not been talking about this opinion widely because a lot of the vast majority of critics have the same reaction you guys, which is like, oh my gosh, it's phenomenal. Some people, I remember reading one reaction that said, I love horror films. I usually, watch tons of horror films, but like I saw it, Hereditary, now I can't sleep anymore. I'm like, whoa, this movie's going to be really scary, I guess. And here's what I'll say is great, is this director, Ari Aster, clearly is an insanely talented person. There's images in this movie that sear their way into your brain, and not just like a mise en scène or something. Like he uses the camera and the editing in ways that are really creative. There's transitions that I remember from the film because of how effective they are. Right. And
he's kind of using the lights out technique, like light to dark, real quick.
Or like he using smash cuts in a way that's or time transitions in a way that's really
his
effective.
Compositions in general are just like there's so much going on in every frame.
Yeah.
Like so good.
I mean, the movie opens with you find out at the beginning that Toni Collette's character's mother has died at the beginning, like literally before you even see any images. It's revealed to you that this was happening.
Death hangs over the entire film.
And there at the funeral there is this photo of the grandmother that like the resolution on the photo is so high. That it feels like the grandmother's there, like in reality.
It's unnerving. It's instantly upsetting.
And it's like right from there, like he starts blurring the distinction between reality and the supernatural. Like and what is there, what's not, and I think that's really interesting. I mean, I think from a technical perspective, the movie's exceptionally well made, and I really love the family dynamics. You have Toni Collette putting on one of the best performances of her career. You got Gabriel Byrne, who is like just trying to manage this situation. He plays her husband. He's trying to manage.
He has no showiness in his performance,
exactly,
but it's also like all internal and all trying to like deal with this madness. Yeah,
he's like a complete side character in this movie, but he does a great job. And of course, the kids, Alex Wolff and Millie Shapiro, who play Peter and Charlie. They also do great. So there's many amazing things about this film, and I would recommend anyone watch it. Like like if you, or particularly if you like horror movies, it's definitely something you should watch. I would not recommend it if you don't want to be scared and terrified and traumatized. But I think like for me, it's not my particular cup of tea because because really fundamentally the storytelling is quite muddled in my opinion, and I have read, I am not exaggerating, I've read no fewer than 6 explainer articles about Hereditary. That's like, here's what's going on in Hereditary's ending. Here's like what all the stuff in Hereditary meant. And right around Article 5, I was like, you know what? I don't know that this is really worth like.
Exactly.
I don't know that this is worth me putting all this time into trying to figure out what the fuck happened in this movie. And many of the explainers are like, we're not even sure what happened. Like, it's open to interpretation, So I'm just like, okay, like, on the one hand, there are many films that are considered masterpieces where the creators and the writer, the filmmakers, don't spell everything out.
Hello, The Shining.
Like The Shining, a lot of Kubrick stuff. 2001, The Shining. Completely respectable and even often a very good way of telling a story. And there's another movie that came out last year or a couple years ago called The One I Love, which is kind of this sci-fi movie that takes place in one location, starring Mark Duplass and Elizabeth Moss, directed by Charlie McDowell. And I saw that movie several times. I really like that movie. And Charlie McDowell in Q&As for that movie was talking about how it's a real balancing act how much information you reveal to the audience, right? How much do you spell out for the audience? And because he had shot like whole sequences for The One I Love where they explain like everything that's going on about the entire premise of that film, and many of those were left on the cutting room floor. And in my opinion, The One I Love, the amount of information that's included is the perfect amount. I don't need any more information than what's there, and it's fine that he excluded all the stuff he did. That is the right amount of theorizing for me that I can deal with. And for Hereditary, it just ventured too far into the I didn't feel like I had enough information. I felt like I had scraps that I had to then assemble using these explainer articles that I've read online.
You're
and
trying
I just
to
felt,
Westworld this movie, Dave.
yeah, it
Yes.
feels like a movie that you got to Westworld, and
Or does it? I mean, okay.
Yeah, I would
but-
say it feels like a movie you've got at Westworld.
Yeah.
yeah, that I, David Chen, have to, right? Yeah, yeah, and that's
And I've heard this from a bunch of people too. Like, right? It's I totally understand where you're coming from, Dave. I'm honestly wondering too, what movies truly frighten you? Because I don't think we've ever had this conversation.
no. This movie, I found this movie to have like some really scary images and really frightening moments. But then, like as the movie went on, and I'm like, I don't think this is gonna conclude in a way that I'm gonna find satisfying. Like then, like
So you were anticipating,
right,
the
like
spoiler.
that's when it starts. Like that's when the scares start having less of an impact for me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But we can talk more about that in spoilers. But yeah. I was not not a bad film, but it's just not a movie that I am over the moon for, as many critics are. So, so anything else we want to mention before we dive into spoilers for this?
I feel like this movie's coming. It feels reminiscent of The Witch in a way too, right?
Yep.
Like it
another
is
A24 film. Yeah.
another A24 film. I think what is essentially a great family drama too at its core, also dealing with like death and loss in certain ways, and then the supernatural like slowly creeps in. And I think of that movie, and I think of some of my favorite horror movies too, like The Shining. I guess I am really comfortable with not everything being explained, especially if what you're doing is evoking, you're evoking a mood. You're trying to tell a story. Like these characters don't know everything that's happening. So I like being in the role of the characters, just like flailing and trying to figure out what's happening, while everything falls apart around them. I was reminded of The Kill List as well.
Yeah.
Ben we
Wheatley's
can talk more
film,
about
Kill
that
List.
in
Yeah.
spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so great comparison, Devindra, actually. But Amin in the Slash Filmcast chat room says Ann Dowd is amazing in this movie, and I just want to give a shout out to Ann Dowd. She was also in American Animals, which is a movie we reviewed not long ago, and she was also great in that.
You're Van Dowd.
Yeah, I'm a big Ann Dowd fan, and I think she brings a great combination of menace and vulnerability to many of the roles that she's done recently. Like, she's a person who you fear, but she's also a person who is like can be very tender and vulnerable, and and I think she definitely expresses both of those qualities in this film. So
and I've got
It's
more
great
about
because
her.
when she shows, when she shows up in a movie, I'm never sure what to expect because of that.
Yeah.
And that's always really exciting. We're like, where are we going? What's Van Dowd gonna do? Like,
I've got more to say about her in spoilers too, because there's so much going on there.
all right, folks, let's get to spoilers for Hereditary starting right now. All right, share some more Ann Dowd love with us, Devindra.
I saw a thing where Ann Dowd led a cult, that was preparing for the end times, but enough about the leftovers.
Nicely
guys.
done. Nicely done.
But also
Boom goes Dynamite.
Also Handmaid's Tale, right?
Yeah, I was
So,
gonna say I'm a little behind, but I was like, I feel like that still qualifies.
it also like, how many cults will this woman lead? That's the question.
She's so good. All of them. All of them all
All
the
of
time,
them.
always.
Yeah.
So now that we're in spoilers, I want to tell you guys a quick story about when I interviewed Millie Shapiro. So it was, as I said, the morning after I saw the movie. I am ravaged. I am barely slept. I've barely eaten. I'm running on steam.
Did she cluck at you?
No.
Apparently, this is a thing in movie theaters, though, that like people in movie theaters are like making that cluck sound for real.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
You can imagine that being
No,
very
thank
frustrating.
you.
That's terrifying. And also the sound design is so good that it seems like it's coming from all over. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I'm
Christy.
saying people are being assholes.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's an incredibly charismatic, very sweet, very smart young woman who is, I think, a Tony winner for Matilda. And she's lovely. And it was funny because it's just a total 180 from the character and everything. But also she was wearing this dress that I thought was really cute. And when I looked closer to see what the pattern was, it was topless cars.
Oh, God.
And when I realized that, I like gasped, and then I apologized because she was talking, and I was like, I'm sorry, I just realized what's on your dress. And then Nat Wolff and Ari Aster turned and looked at her, and Nat Wolff went, Millie, that is so dark.
That's so good.
So I just wanted to share that because I've been sitting on that story because I couldn't say it in my interview because it's such a spoiler. But yeah, that was, and she was just like, yeah, I thought it was cute. And I was like, you're amazing.
Like,
I thought the
love
sequence
trolling
where
everybody.
yeah, go ahead, Devendra.
She was just trolling everybody who was
Yeah,
coming to
yeah.
interview.
She even had a matching necklace that she's like, look, it rolls. And it was a little car that rolled. But I was like, I can't, like, if it had just been a car, that would have been bad enough. But it was like a topless car, which felt like such a joke. I couldn't handle it. So Millie Shapiro, she's a sharp one. Watch out for her.
I thought the sequence where her character is decapitated was really well done overall, but it did kind of beggar belief to me that a family where one of the people has a severe nut allergy would not bring the EpiPen everywhere.
That's true. But also, teenage boys fuck up everything.
No,
yeah,
that's true.
he's a reckless stoner boy who
he's all messed up at that point. So I guess maybe
Right.
maybe they did have the EpiPen. You know, like
right.
maybe just didn't know about
I'm not really caught up in that. What I find so shocking about that is how it's staged, where like you think the breathing is going to be the problem. I 100% did not see that telephone pole coming, and I mean, I guess neither did she. But but like
Nice.
it happens, and instead of just like cutting to the like, you don't see the head come off. You just get the impression of it, right? And then like instead of like cutting to the head,
Yes.
we follow him home. We don't see the body in the back of the car right away. We just see like in the dark, right? And then it follows him into his room, and then it sits there with him, and then like just the patience that Aster has in this movie, the way he makes us sit with these moments of dread, when they finally cut back to the head, I mean, like it's like the opposite of a jump scare. It's as in like Devendra said, it's like the sun is starting to come up, but it's like a dark scene that then cuts to that, and it cuts to her head, and it cuts to the ants on the head, and like then it just sits on that shot
for like 10 seconds. Or something.
It feels like an eternity, and it's like you are trapped in this damnation of this moment with them, and like that. I was just at that point in the movie, I was just like scared out of my mind and totally hooked.
Well, I loved how he is like basically completely catatonic, you know, and that's not something like we see Toni Collette's character have the big reaction to it, but we don't see.
We don't even see it. We hear it.
We hear it. Well, we also see her like in her room and wailing.
Yeah, afterward.
But like Peter, played by Alex Wolff, like he's actually so catatonic that he. Like becomes a terrible person, you know, because he doesn't. When he gets home, he doesn't even say, "Hey, by the way, this horrible thing happened. We need to." Like he leaves. He lets his mom discover it in the morning.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, and it's like it's awful, but it's also like I don't know, like
somewhat understandable, right? Like,
you
can
like what do you?
Like, well, once you face it, once you face that moment in your life, like, there's no going back, right?
I think that's what it is, right? I think it's that he's trying to put off because he knows that there's no going back beyond that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And that's something that the movie does really well. Like, is like, and that's the thing. Like, all the family stuff I thought was really, really strong. You know, the stuff about like when they're at dinner and arguing, and she kind of goes off on him, and he never apologized, and you see like all this tension just building up and exploding, and the performances, it's all great stuff. It is when the movie veers into the supernatural, and it's like, by the way, it's not just metaphorical demons you're passing on, it is literal demons. I mean, I know that's the point of the film, but it kind of loses me.
I get it. I feel like it's I don't know. I don't tend to like cult movies. Like I don't know. They just don't tend to scare me in the same way, which I think is why this one stands out so much to me. Like we talked about The Witch and Kill List, and I understand that both of those are well constructed movies, but neither of them move Mercury for me. They do nothing for me. But this one, I think because the family stuff, it feels like ordinary people, like just cranked up to 15 or something. It's just so raw that when the supernatural stuff really starts kicking in, because there's like hints of it throughout, there's hints of weird stuff going on throughout, but when it really starts kicking in, like it felt, I got it. I like when I spoke to Aster the next day, he confirmed my thought, which is that the film is effectively about that sensation and that fear that you are doomed in your family. Like whenever a family is going through a dark time, or whenever maybe you see yourself repeating things that your parents did that you don't like, and you feel trapped by it, right? Like that's what
cursed.
This movie is.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You think you're cursed. And like this is like a literal interpretation of that. And you know, like that fear, I mean, took it on so deeply watching the film that when we get into the finale, I was just a total sucker for it. And like, for me, the two shots I referred to before, one is the headshot, because that image is just so horrific and it's so starkly lit that you can't not look at it. You can't, like eventually I looked away because I was losing my mind looking at it, but like I couldn't forget it. It's still scorched in there. The other shot, and seeing this at South by was so special, is when he's sitting in his room and he's facing the camera but not looking at it, right? But he's sitting on his bed, and Toni Collette is in the background on the goddamn ceiling, and he doesn't know she's there.
Yeah.
And when I saw that in theaters, I was looking at the scene. My friend next to me chuckled and then looked me dead in the eye. And I looked at him and I looked back at the screen, and then I saw it.
That's a perfect way to get that realization too.
Yeah. And I screamed. I think I went like, oh my God, or just, I was so terrified. And then you could hear other people in the theater, like once, and I may not have been the first person to scream, but I'm very aware of my reaction. But then you could hear like people throughout the theater seeing it, because they're all going like, oh, and like
terror, like a virus or something.
Yeah, it's spread. And then it's like, but like the shot doesn't cut away, right? It just sits there. And again, it's like, I said to him in the interview, I was like, was that something you knew going into this that you wanted to do, or was that a choice you found in the edit? And Peter and like Nat Wolff was like, oh, we sat in those scenes for really long times. Like he just kept rolling and kept rolling. And like the fact that it's insane to me that a first time director had the confidence to do that and to trust the audience with that. And I know it's not been working across the board, because we got a really interesting email about that, but, which we can talk about. But, I mean, for me, this is a midnight movie at South by Southwest, and like other midnight movies were like Upgrade and something called Bloodfest that was like a really, goofy, like, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of them are like really goofy, really gory, Unfriended 2, that kind of stuff. This was so patient and so daring, and I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe watching this movie. I was astonished.
Yeah, Devendra, how did you see it? Did you see it at a press screening?
No, I saw it at BAM at a normal, everyday screening. I have to say though, like I'm very glad that the projection at that theater is very good. Because I saw some people complaining like there were certain scenes where they felt like they should be reacting, they couldn't make out what was happening. It was because the theater they were in was just projecting it too dimly. So like that ceiling sequence, if it's not bright enough, you won't even see like what's happening there. And then like I love how by the time we kind of pan away to the door, you see her skittering up the top too.
Oh God.
Yeah.
We are in a situation now where like Solo has received a lot of complaints because of how low contrast it is. Much of it is shot in really dark environments, and if you don't have good projection, you will not experience the film the way the filmmakers wanted you to experience it, which is really weird now. Like that, it's so like you'd think that with digital the experience would be more consistent, but it's not. And it's fascinating that like a scene like that with Toni Collette on the ceiling could be completely incomprehensible if it's not projected correctly.
And there are several scenes like that throughout the movie too. I really love some of those scares, or just some of those like it's just a brief glimpse at something in a corner. I think Millie in a corner at one point right before the hands come behind the kid to get him. But also with Solo, the sad thing was that was a press screening, and it was still a little too dim for me because it was being shown in a that whatever that theater, the one on 68th Street, which is normally good. Dave, I want to hear more though, because we're talking about how much we love it. The supernatural stuff didn't work for you. Is there anything in particular?
Yeah, let's get into it. But first, I just want to read this email from Dalton from Florida, who writes into /filmcast@gmail.com. Dalton recalls an incident where he spoke with his friend about watching Hereditary, and he says, quote, his audience, Dalton's friend's audience, where my audience had been screaming, was instead laughing. I honestly thought he was messing with me. He went through multiple scenes where people were laughing at the acting, laughing at the scares. My friend thought the film was good, but not the horror show which I described. Shortly after he called me to tell me this, I saw the cinema score was D+. Obviously, cinema score doesn't matter at the end of the day, but I'm truly shocked by this disconnect. For me, it was a magical, epic horror film-going experience. For others, it's a comedy show? ? End quote. Yeah. So what was the reaction? Like, I had a very respectful audience, no laughter or very little laughter.
Well, I mean, laughter, it depends on how it is too, right? Like when you're scared, sometimes that's the only thing your body can do.
Nervous laughter is, I feel like,
Yeah.
a very reasonable reaction to a film like Hereditary.
And
But it
there
sounds like
are
that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
very dark jokes in this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's in the dinner scene, I laughed a couple of times, and
Oh,
then I
man.
was just immediately like, oh, I might be evil. Like, how did that happen? But my brother-in-law, I actually asked him when he saw it if people were laughing or if people were into it, and he said he thought people were pretty into it, but he said that he thinks they were laughing at the movie toward the end.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because it definitely, like you were talking about not quite buying the supernatural stuff, Dave. I think when it gets really didactic about what's going on, it's like, oh, this is a cult. So now we're going to get the cult people and doing the weird culty things. And then you get to the final scene, and it's literally like, just hailing the new demon that they, that they bring on.
One of the
like,
better explanations of the ending that I read was by Britt Hayes over at ScreenCrush.com, who wrote a piece entitled Hereditary Explainer, a spoilery guide to the terrifying twists and that wild ending. And what she wrote about the ending is as follows, quote, "In the end, a crown is placed on Peter's head as the cult bows before him. While the literal meaning of this scene is chilling enough, it's the existential implications that are truly upsetting. An entire history of familial tragedy and trauma, of pain and mental illness has been foisted upon him. That crown represents a burden, a weight beyond measure. What appears to be a twisted celebration is a moment of horrible defeat, as Peter is given no choice but chosen. Ultimately, we're left with the most indelible image in a film filled with them, Peter, the king of pain, who fell into his position by virtue of nothing more than circumstance," end quote. I do like this idea that you don't get to choose your family, and that like you inherit a bunch of your family's hang-ups and genetics and diseases and all these things that you had no control over, and that sometimes you may not want to inherit those things. And like that is a truth that I think the supernatural elements of the film do a good job of bringing out. But as I said, I think that ultimately, I thought the movie was better when it was grounded. Like, okay, spoilers for the Babadook. Spoilers for the Babadook. Tune out if you don't want to hear spoilers for the Babadook. But one thing I really love about the Babadook is you can read that film as entirely a family drama and like no supernatural elements whatsoever. Like, it is possible to watch that film and like, oh, it was all like that. The Babadook was just a physical manifestation of grief. It was all in her head. Like, it's completely possible to read it that way. I don't feel like it's possible to read this film that way. Like, as though like it's all in their head and it's not really a cult and it's not really like literally Payman, the demon. Like I just don't think the text of the film lends itself to that reading. And for me, that's just less interesting because the idea of like a family like that you're trying to escape from, you're trying to escape from the things you inherit from a family and the relationships in a family, like, and being unable to escape from that family, like that is a much more grounded and scary thing to contemplate than a demon is trying to possess my body and a cult is going to help them do it. Like one of those things I can relate to and the other one I can't.
I mean, but it seems like it's all about fate then, right? Like, because I mean, there's setup for that. Like, there's a mention of the brother who killed himself and like Toni Collette writes it off at the time when she's in the support group talking about how like he said my mother was trying to something
World's
about my mother's
support group session, by the way. Just another point where I was laughing, but yeah.
There's setup to it. And like, I think I understand the frustration at the ending because I feel like all of a sudden a lot of this stuff is thrown at you and some of the imagery is almost silly because it just feels so different from what we've seen before. Like everybody being naked, I feel like, especially with like American audiences, we inherently get a little giggly when we're like, why is everyone naked? So I feel like that's my brother-in-law said people were laughing when the naked people showed up. And I was like, okay, like I get
sure,
I understand why that happened. That was not my reaction, but also like it was 3 a.m. and I was losing my mind. But like, I think because there's like an exposition dump in the end, it makes people confused, which I think is why you're getting all these things. But for me, did I totally understand all the exposition in the end? No, which is also why I read the explainers, just to be like, did I miss something? And like, I don't think I did. I think I basically had the pieces there. For me, though, it's just the end. While I think the end gets a little sloppy and it's not as tight and thoughtful as the rest of the film necessarily. I don't care because
Mhm.
like the driving force of the film was so good that I'm just kind of on board. And you know, the ending is so upsetting because in the end it's like nothing any of them did really mattered. It was all going to come to this place no matter what because of things out of their control, and like that's really terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I
it
feel
becomes
like
scary in a new way.
like even though we have the overt supernatural stuff, like there is enough of the subtext in there to be like, oh, that what's actually really terrifying though is that yeah, you can't really escape this. This is what's happening there. And also like even the naked people, like the horror for me was like, how many of those people did we just see like casually, strolling around in the movie
Oh, wow.
before? Like, there's that. It's like these people are just like they're part of this like whatever curse is a part of your family. The weird, creepy, smiling guy from the funeral right at the beginning, like you certainly see him, but so many other people as well. And to me, that's it really gets at like the suspicion I'd have, like you never know what other people are up to as well. I keep bringing up The Shining, but this movie just kind of evokes that for me. We never know why. Why is Jack in a freaking photo? How's that work? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because like what the essence of the movie is that his soul has been trapped there or will be trapped there or is essentially trapped there as all those other poor spirits. And for me, I got the driving essence of this movie for sure. I did read some of the
I think one of the things about the ending that was kind of ineffective for me is that Christy points out one of the things, which is like this kind of exposition dump at the end. Like really a lot of information is thrown at the audience in the last 20 minutes of the film, right? But also I think another thing is for movies like this, there's a question of like, what are the rules here? What can this creature Payman, like what can they do? They can force people like Toni Collette's character to decapitate themselves. But it's like, well, why didn't they just do that? Why didn't this demon just do that earlier in the movie? When you introduce a force like this and you have very ill-defined rules, then it raises all these questions that I don't want to be thinking about. I'd rather just be caught up in the moment of what's happening, and it was tough for me to do that. So that's all I'll say about the ending and why I was not a fan.
I hear that.
Yeah. But Christy shared her kind of indelible image from the film. Like Devindra, any indelible images that kind of stick in your mind as we wrap this up? I mean, I think for me, for some reason, the image that stuck with me was the one where like it's her dream, and like she tells her son that it was a mistake to have him, and then all of a sudden they like start catch on fire and they start burning before she wakes up. I just thought that was like a really deeply upsetting set of things to occur in sequence.
Deeply upsetting feels like the entire movie for me. Certainly the decapitated head shot, where not just how horrific it is, but how long it lasts and how much it like. There's very little. What do you call it? There's very little space around the frame either, around like the actual head. Like it's just really focused on it. Like it is. It's to me, like I think most horror films, even if they do something that horrific, it's a glimpse. I think of like The Ring, and when there's a mention of like, oh, did you see her face? And then it's like a half-second shot of the horrific face. And I think being forced to confront an image like that, there's another shot like the dream sequence where the ants are all over the boy's face as well, like in his bed.
Yeah, the ant
like
motif is really effective. Yeah,
the ant motif. Toni Collette, like when Gabriel Byrne's character just catches on fire. So many of the images in this movie, you just feel like pure, indelibly horrific to me. So, yeah, I have too many to choose from, basically. But I think that sequence that we talked about of the kid, like after the decapitation sequence happens, and he's just catatonic, just like kind of accepting it, like, okay, this happened. I'm just gonna drive home. I'm gonna go to bed, and everything's gonna be normal. And I'm probably gonna think about that sequence forever because it's just so
it's pretty upsetting, and it feels pretty plausible too. I do wish we had gotten a little bit more of the like what happened, because it basically cuts forward like months. And
they never talk about it, really.
Right. And I guess that's part of the point is like, oh, they like it went unacknowledged, but I guess I just feel like it would have come up in conversation at some
A
point.
police conversation or
Yeah,
something.
you know, like
But it's like it doesn't allow us the insight to any sense
Yeah.
of feeling the button on that moment. There is
Right.
no button on that moment. We're robbed of it, so we're just stuck with that tension. And because, like, you
but I
know,
would
there's
say-
no resolution.
Yeah, I would say that's okay. Like in some cases, Christy, like there's times when like robbing me of that resolution is okay when like I'm supposed to feel like how the characters feel, like, and the characters never had resolution. But I guess I feel like it's implausible to me that there wouldn't have been some kind of reckoning. Maybe the family is just so good at like stuffing down their feelings that they never confronted each other about it. But even in the argument that's depicted on screen, it does feel like they've talked about it before.
No, I'm not saying they haven't talked about it before, but I'm saying that, like, you know, it doesn't matter that they've talked about it. It's not resolved. So it's like to keep us in that sense of tension where he, you know, feels trapped. Like they don't give us even that kind of, there's no break in tension. There's no relief. And it's like, you know, a lot of times jump scares are means of giving us a break in tension, right? And allowing us to kind of scream and let loose and giggle or whatever. And like Aster doesn't give us that. He just keeps turning the screws, right? I understand that this doesn't work for everybody. But for me, like I just thought that there's such a mastery of tone and suspense in this that like it literally took my breath away.
Yeah,
awesome.
And we get a sense early on too that this isn't a family that communicates very well. Too.
Yeah,
like that whole. I go back and listen. Just think about the conversation, getting the girl, basically Toni Collette's character convincing Alex Wolff's character to bring his sister along, bring her to the party.
Yeah,
it's such like a back and forth of like passive aggressive bullshit.
Yeah.
That felt shocking to me, like for this to be a conversation between a mother and son. Like, is this kid just like super petulant or something, and the mother just doesn't have time for it? Like something deeper happened here, and we eventually learn what that is. But yeah, I'm looking forward to like re-experiencing those conversations, like knowing where this movie goes, because I think a lot of that is kind of laid out at the beginning too. Like, Christy, you were saying you didn't see the poll. That ended up decapitating Charlie, but on the drive to the party, like the camera just stops for like a half second at the pole.
God.
And there's like markings on it too, as if there's a lot of like breadcrumbs throughout this movie too, like maybe that was supposed to happen. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that like Payman or the cult like somehow engineered that situation. But again, it's all pretty hazy in my opinion, and there's many interpretations as to how it occurred. No matter the case, I'm really glad it worked for you guys, and I do think that Ari Aster is a bold new filmmaking talent whose work will be worth watching in the future.
His short films are online, by the way, and a lot of people are talking about those, and they sound really interesting. So it's not like he just made this movie out of nowhere. He's kind of been building up this his technique and his talent for years now.
Awesome.
I'm curious what you guys think about Toni Collette, because the conversation is like, could she be a dark horse for the Oscars?
Oh,
and like,
God, yes.
A24 is like already kind of, I mean, you've seen the ads on Twitter and stuff that are already kind of beating that drum for her. So I'm curious what you like. Devendra's full on board.
I'm fully on board. Like that dinner sequence alone. I think David Ehrlich is just posting some GIFs from that sequence, and just like the way her face contorts and the way she's thinking to herself, and there's just so much going on in there.
Yeah, I'm on board. I think Toni Collette for Best Actress definitely has my vote. So
I'm excited to hear that. I think she's amazing, and I feel like it's been hard traditionally for actors in horror movies to get recognition. Like I think the last one was the woman from The Exorcist, right? Or not The Exorcist. Rosemary's Baby, Ruth Gordon. Am I right? Nobody won for Silence of the Lambs, right?
Yeah.
I'll have to look at that.
I have to look it up, yeah.
This was something I was looking at when we were coming into like Get Out and stuff like that, but I think that's accurate. But like A24, I think they could make a stand with this, and Colette is like known, so I feel like this could be the thing that like finally kind of breaks through that barrier. The Academy seems to know her and like her, but then the downside is that I don't know, will the Academy be on board for this movie? I can see a lot of people shutting off the screeners.
Indeed. Well, we'll see. But yeah, that's our review of Hereditary, and well worth checking out in theaters if you have a chance. It is extremely scary. Find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Our theme song comes from adamwarrock.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from Kyle Hillinger, filmmaker Kyle Hillinger. Stay tuned to hear what we'll be talking about next week. In the meantime, Christy Puchko, where can we find more of your work on the internet this week?
I write all over the web. You can find my career highlights at decadentcriminals.com, and I write every day at pajiba.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Christy Puchko, KristyPuchko.
How about you, Devindra?
Or you can find me on Twitter at Devindra, and I write about tech at Engadget.com.
Find me on Twitter at Dave Chensky, that's Dave Chen SKY, and youtube.com/Dave Chensky. Next week, we'll be discussing The Incredibles 2. Very highly anticipated movie that I think we'll have some strong opinions on. So thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Slash Filmcast. We'll see you later.